California Air Resources Board, which is where some of the absolute worst ideas in California state government are born, has proposed this ridiculous new rule that says that any locomotive that is not zero emission can't enter the state of California starting in a few years. And what's ridiculous about that is a couple of things. First of all, the locomotives that can actually work to pull a train that are all electric don't currently exist, and there are experts that say they're never going to exist. And then think about how nonsensical it is to try and run a national freight network where every state has its own requirements on the locomotives that can cross the state line. And so, these railroads are put in this impossible situation because every time they come to a state line, they've got to switch locomotives. It's ridiculous. So I've been trying to shed light on this issue and pressure the EPA not to grant the waiver that CARB needs to implement this rule, because they need federal permission, because the federal government is the one that has preemption over national transportation issues, and this is certainly one of them. So we had a hearing in the House Science Committee this week talking about that. Just a couple of days ago, I had some experts from a variety of different industries in the rail industry, in the rail sector, talking about just how nonsensical and unachievable this is, and I'm hopeful that we're putting enough pressure on the EPA that they're going to deny the waiver, because this is a ridiculous situation.
So I think you're right that it would be very difficult to get a freight train with enough power with electric energy to pull the amount that they pull. But then think about when you have electric trains, you need either a third rail or you need the wires above. You'd have to rewire all of these railways, which would be an impossible cost, I assume. And the reality is, I think you'd have freight train companies saying, we're just not going to come into California.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what they're doing. I mean, the BNSF has said that this $1.5 billion project that they're doing in Barstow, this intermodal facility that they're building there, that, by the way, is going to be 20,000 new jobs in the high desert, they are not going to put it there if CARB enforces this ridiculous rule.
And what does this mean? So, number one, it's bad for your district, Congressman, because you're going to lose out on the opportunity to create a lot of jobs. That's number one. But with all of these regulations, with all of this ridiculousness, it just makes the cost of doing business in California even greater. Won't that be part of the problem with this?
Oh, absolutely. And this is an illustration of what California state government has done again and again and again and again. Every time they implement something that raises the cost of energy, or in this case, raises the cost of transporting freight, that means that we all in California pay a little bit more. And that's why California has, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, the highest poverty rate of any state in the country. It's because of all of these nonsensical regulations that have piled up on top of each other that have raised the cost of living here. It's completely untenable.
Yeah. I tell the story all the time, but California basically did this to the trucking industry. They put so many restrictions on trucks. Congressman, I don't know if you knew, but I used to have a trucking company. I sold it a couple of years ago, ran out of Texas, and I would not run 18-wheelers into California, one, because it was illegal for me with the trucks that I had to run in California. And so, I'm not the only businessman that was making that decision. So what do you think happens? It becomes very, very expensive to move goods into this state because of all these kinds of silly decisions based on nothing.
Exactly. I mean, ask yourself why we pay twice as much for residential electricity in California as people do in neighboring states like Arizona and Nevada. Twice as much. And that's that is a cost that hits everyone. And ironically, it even hits organizations like CARB, because people can't justify switching to an electric vehicle, which is what they want people to do, right? They're trying to force people to do that. But how on earth can you do that when you're paying 42 cents a kilowatt hour for electricity? It just makes no sense.